really excited to be here. Man, what a time to be alive. I'm here 21 years in the Air Force, and I'm up here talking about video games and virtual reality. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. It's like the nerd's dream come true. So I'm not going to spend too much time on my background. I don't have too much time, but I am my opinion, a lifelong Korean linguist, and that is exactly what I joined the Air Force to do. And so one of the things that's ever been a challenge for me is sort of have intrinsic, motivation to learn language. I'm one of those rare people that joined the Air Force to become a Korean linguist. That's what I wanted from a recruiter. But what I realized very quickly when I was teaching at DLI back in 2002, right after everyone had joined because of 9/11, that wasn't their expectation. They came in to kill terrorists. They didn't join the military to sit 75 weeks in a classroom learning a language they never asked for, right? So I sort of have this mission in life to find out what it is that gets people to want to learn language. And this is where we come to some of the things we're talking about, gamification, and now virtual reality. So I'd say it's an understatement to say I'm a little bit obsessed with this technology, hence that's why I'm here. And I want to tell you just my experience I had. It was 2 Christmases ago. I just sold my house in Hawaii, and I thought, I'm going to get myself a little Christmas present. What do I want? And I saw these videos online. I think pretty much most people have seen these reaction videos now of people doing VR, running into walls and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm like, this looks crazy. I got to get into this. I'm one of those dumb early adopters that will drop money on anything if it looks interesting. So I went ahead and did this, and I'll be honest with you guys, it's way beyond anything I could have possibly expected. It was a near religious experience. I was up the entire night thinking about how this could be utilized for training, education, and just the future in general, right? So even though it was just a gaming platform at the time, and this was less than a year after the HTC Vive had come out. That was the system that I purchased. It was the best system that was out at the time. And it was just completely eye-opening to me. So I'm going to spend 20, 30 minutes talking about this. Anytime I can force people to listen to me talk about virtual reality, it's a good day for me. So hope you find this interesting. So really quick question. Anyone know of the government agency that had probably the most influence on the development of virtual reality in the last 60 years? DARPA? Yes. You guess, right? Well, one of the 3 sort of industry accepted fathers of virtual reality is actually a gentleman named Tom Furness, and he was working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for the U.S. Air Force. And as you could probably imagine, pilot training has definitely been one of the most well-publicized and oldest use cases of virtual reality. And sure enough, way back in the day, this is actually the 80s, but he started developing it back in the 60s, what they call the super cockpit. And this is kind of the HMD that we think is kind of like a new term, head-mounted displays. No, this was used way back in the 60s. So now, of course, mounting 2 CRT screens onto your face is a little bit of a challenge. So you could say, we complain about the virtual reality systems we have now. The form factor back then, there's a little something to be wanted there, I think. A couple basically TVs stuck on your head. So I think they decided they could probably do a little bit of that. So we're going to move on to why are we here talking about this for education. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just training and education in general and why VR is so unique in its ability to teach us things, and then go a little bit into the language side of things. And then I'm going to show you a video of a whole bunch of Chinese linguists that I worked with at Hawaii. We sort of demoed it with them and got their reactions, so I'm going to show you guys a little video of that. So here is a picture. What do you guys think of it?
Awesome.
Hawaii, right? Hawaii. I kind of wish I was there right now. I was there for 6 years and I still miss it every day. But the lady over here had asked me earlier, why is it and what is it about VR that provides you more maybe immersion or learning experience than just your regular video or medium? And what we don't take into consideration is how much abstraction is actually in traditional media. There's so much abstraction going on, and we're so used to it that we don't really even think about it anymore, right? So, for example, when you're looking at this picture, do you feel like you're really there? I guess you could argue, you could, you want to be there, right? But what else is sort of limiting? Well, where's the immersion aspect of it? Can you look away from the picture? You do, you actually have that ability, and as you can imagine in virtual reality, you kind of don't have the ability to escape, right? It's just so immersive. What else? You're not in the perspective of the person that's in there, right? There's not really a sense of presence. You're actually at the mercy of whoever the photographer or the director is of a movie. They will tell you where to look, they will tell you where to go, they'll tell you where to focus on, right? So these are all things that we just kind of accept. Also, obviously when we talk about interaction, when you watch a movie, it's a completely passive experience. It's one directional, it's a lecture, you're taking it in, right? Now when you get into video games and those kinds of things, there is interaction, but that's also completely abstract. When you think about how should I jump? I'm going to press this red button on a controller. Is that anything like jumping in real life? No, right? Completely not. It's completely abstracted. But we don't really think of it that way because that's the only real way we've been able to interact with media in the past. That make sense? Yeah. Am I tracking? Okay. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. The point is we learn what we do, not what we necessarily see. Anyone play the telephone game? A little board game called Tellustrations. I don't know if you guys heard of it. One of my favorites. But basically, it's when you tell someone something, right? And then you tell the next person, you tell the next person. And then the first person talks to the last person. And you can do this with pictures, too. It never ends up being the same, right? And the reason is because we don't absorb that. And this has all been studied. This is decades of research and completely accepted by the academic academy. And that is Edgar Dale's cone of learning, or cone of experience, sometimes that it's called, right? And, you know, these percentages are conveniently rounded off to tens. And I'm sure, you know, you can make an argument for how much of this is actually true. But I think we all understand the concept, right? So you got reading, hearing, seeing, watching a movie, watching a demonstration, participating, and then doing something in real life. How much of that you're actually retaining, right? Also, you could understand that it actually makes it a lot more difficult to simulate these things. The closer it is to a real experience, the more resources, more time, more investment it's going to take to get that experience, right? For me to tell you how to play tennis and then to go out and play it with you is going to take a lot more time and resources. Does that make sense? That's where virtual reality comes in. So this is kind of the concept behind why it's so effective. And you guys ever sit in a classroom in language, and I'm sure everyone here has, or most of you have, why it is that we always try to sort of avoid speaking and writing?
It's active versus passive.
It's active versus passive. And look at that first block, reading, hearing, the first two skills that we learn in language, sort of the lower level skills, right? They're passive. What the third one requires is actually synthesis, right? It requires you to create things. When you're writing and you're speaking, you're formulating, you're creating, you're synthesizing. It takes a lot more effort, it takes a lot more ability, it takes a lot more engagement, right? Hence, you learn more. So, with that in mind, what are the actual benefits? And I know that's been the big question about virtual reality. What is the big benefit? Okay, so first of all, let's talk about personalization. And I want to sort of hedge on this and have you guys understand that's actually a limitation of VR as well. One of the sort of unfortunate nature of VR is that it's one device per person, right? I can broadcast it out here for you guys, but what's the point? You're not in virtual reality. The other 90 people that are watching someone else do it is not going to get the same experience. But the great thing about VR is it's extremely personalized, and it's probably the only technology I've found where the divide between the user and the observer, the optics are so different, right? So I think you've seen Ready Player One. Anyone seen the movie? What do you guys think? Is that all right? I think we all kind of fear this dystopian future where we're all stuck, you know, with these headsets on, and maybe reality has to get so bad that we have to try to sort of escape into virtual reality, right? We kind of have that optic that it's just from the outside, it just doesn't look very pleasant, especially when you put children in and people think, oh, we're altering their brains. We've seen The Matrix, right? You're basically living in virtual reality, you know, your whole life. Compared to the internal experience. So if you talk to people who have tried high-end VR, the responses are just incredible because you're just able to do things at a personal level. It's so personal to people. It's an experience. The second thing we always talk about, the big I word, right, in language. We talk about immersion all the time. Immersion training, immersion experiences, immersive language. Well, what is immersion? Would anyone like to maybe shoot out a one word or one sentence definition of immersion? Just for fun. Putting yourself in the situation. That's great. That's great. Would you guys agree that's a fairly good definition? Or at least trying to simulate it, right? Okay. I would argue that there's the other half of it that we don't think about, and that's actually the exclusion of everything else. And so when you guys are in that country, and Sergeant Seto was talking about living in a country, having to live in that world. You're also, like, if you're in Korean culture, you're actually outside of American culture, right? So it's the exclusion of everything else that makes something inclusive, and you're absolutely right. So that's something that happens in VR. By show of hands, I would say, how many people have tried high-end VR on a computer-based system? HTC Vive, Oculus Rift. So we're looking at maybe 25%, maybe 20%. Okay, so it's to the point where you very much lose yourself. If someone were to come in while you're doing this in your house and rob all your stuff, you wouldn't know. For better or for worse, I'm just being honest. You would have no clue whatsoever. In fact, they actually built in, on the headsets, usually a little bit of crevice here, and this is actually purposeful, not only just for ventilation, but also that you have a sliver of the outside world that you can kind of see through your nose bridge. It's just too immersive, almost to a certain extent. In fact, that's sort of another limitation of VR. It's not purposefully built for multitasking. You know, when you have your computer and you jump on there to watch a video, but somehow you got 17 tabs open, and now you're doing something else, looking up like cookie recipes when you started looking for how to fix your car. So VR doesn't really work that way. Actually, you're so immersed, you're so focused, and I think that's extremely valuable, though. When you think about somebody who's very attention deficit, or just it's hard for them to focus, especially maybe our younger generation. I'm not calling any of you guys out. I'm super sporadic in the way I think. But for me, when I'm in VR, for example, nothing else is there. There's just, I can't even eat. I don't even know where the food is, right? So there's very little. It's a good way to lose weight. If you're in VR a lot, you won't eat that much. You won't snack that much, I promise you. Anyway, so, and another reason is because you're actually very physical. You're moving around. I'd say along with the Kinect, the Xbox Kinect, which is a gaming device where you are using your body as a controller. 6DoF, which is 6 Degrees of Freedom VR, is the only other technology that I've seen that really gets people up and moving. To me, it's like the salvation, that we don't become the blob people from WALL-E, you guys, because technology is a very passive experience for most of us, right? It's this or this, right? So I think 6DoF VR really offers that benefit of being able to get engaged. So that's the immersive side of things. So this word is very important, and I think the reason for that is because I don't think any other technology in the history of humankind has been able to really give you this, almost this feeling, I guess you could say. If you have a sense of presence of being somewhere, that's where a lot of immersion comes in as well. It's just very hard to simulate without everything coming in together. And actually, modern VR, what we talk about right now, which I just explained has been around for decades, but modern VR, the newer systems, it's really an amalgamation and a gathering of so many different technologies that just could not have happened 5 years ago. We're talking about optics, data rate, processing speed, GPUs, all these things. If one or two of those were out of the picture, it would just take out that VR experience and that immersive presence completely. So it was a perfect time. It really couldn't have happened at any other point in history. You could argue, we could have discovered human flight 300 years ago, right? You could argue these kinds of things. You can't argue this when you're talking about trying to get that presence. And why is presence so important? Well, it's important because you have, for example, I'll give you just one aspect of presence, is a sense of scale. So what does scale mean? Well, if you're looking at a building, you can tell that you're 1/100th the size of a building, right? Now, if you're in an IMAX theater, great. You got that same sense of scale because of the size of the screen, right? And that's, once again, abstracted. If you see Brad Pitt's face on a 40-foot screen, if you're into that kind of thing, then that's a weird sense of scale where his face is too big. The point is, when you're in VR, right, not only do you have a real sense of scale, you really feel like you're standing in front of a 30-foot building, but you also have complete control over that scale. You can shrink that building down to the size of a rat. You can make it the size of a dinosaur. So obviously all at the whim of the developer, depending on what the software actually is. Accessibility. So I'll tell you guys the real moment when I realized where the potential for VR accessibility is one of my motivations for getting VR actually is very personal. My father has multiple sclerosis. He's been in a wheelchair for 30 years. He had to retire early because of it. And so he's very limited in what he can do. Now, he stopped gaming after the Atari 5200. When things went on to more than one button, he decided that was enough for him, right? When with the NES, it was 2 buttons. He's like, oh, I'm done, right? So now we get to all these video games, and we've got keyboards and WASD and 14 buttons on an Xbox. So as soon as I realized that my dad could play this game, he was in his wheelchair, and it's actually an ice fishing game. He's loved fishing his entire life. And in this game, you have to do everything manually with the HTC Vive controllers. You have to take the bait out of your box. You have to put it on your hook. You have to grab your saw the ice. You have to dig the ice out with a scoop, right? And then you have to plop it in, reel it in, catch the fish, all that good stuff. Now you can just imagine doing that with an Xbox controller and 14 buttons. How do you think my dad would react to that, right? So as I was talking about being abstracted and having accessibility, is that in VR, everything is very intuitive just because of the nature. And it's funny because when I put people in VR, and I've been privileged to be able to demonstrate it for NSA, for CIA, FBI, Air Force, Army, and I get always the same reaction, right, in these questions when people are in it for the first time. Their question is, Sergeant Kirk, how do I jump? I'm like, well, so, they're looking for the button to jump, right? And they're like, how do I grab that thing over there? Right? And it's funny because we're so programmed to kind of have interface, right? We expect to interface. We expect a bridge between us and technology. We don't expect to be able to reach out and grab things, right? And actually, it's actually too much sometimes. So you guys were talking about Skyrim and games like Fallout, where you kill a mutant and it's dead on the ground, and you got to loot it for all of its stuff, right? So in that game in VR, you press a button and you loot that thing. You get all the items, right? People are like, that's so fake. That's so fake. Why can't I want to reach down and actually grab it? So it's funny because people ask for that, but they don't want to scoop down 7,000 times and loot bodies. You know what I mean? So that's the great thing about virtual reality. It's better than reality in many ways. You can go above and beyond what you could do and have shortcuts if that's what you want. So accessibility is very important, and I think that's one of the things. There's only 3 main buttons on the Vive, and you can play games like Fallout and Skyrim and these types of games because everything is, so how do you punch? You do this. How do you shoot an arrow? You do this. Right? How do you jump? You do this. How do you walk? You do this. There's no buttons to press. There's, you just use your body. So pretty much anybody can do that. Oh. Okay, and I think Mr. Link had talked about this just a little bit in terms of adult learning principles and how important autonomy is, right? So we constantly see this at the 3.3 level and above in language, that adult learners, right? And we know all about this at the HLC, where Ling Wen's from, and we really propelled this, is that whole concept is very important for adult learners, right? Every time we have control and we have agency in what we're trying to learn, we always tend to learn it better. If we decided we're going to be doing something, that's just human nature, right? It's human nature that we do it better. So another aspect of abstraction is that up until now, we haven't had volumetric space, right? Except in real life, where you can walk in and out of things, you can pick something up and sort of look at it, right? Everything that we've designed in, for example, 3 dimensions has been on a 2D screen. Now, if that doesn't seem weird to you, it's probably because, once again, we've accepted that in our brains, that we're going to design 3D objects in a 2D space, right? On a flat screen. We don't have to anymore. So one of the greatest videos or programs on VR, and I'll show you a video of it, is Tilt Brush and Google Blocks. These are some of the tools that Google has made. And you can create, design, and I'll do all those kinds of things in a volumetric space, which really is limitless. And I want to consider, anyone here worked on an ops floor before? DCGS or other military ops floors. You're not really constrained by reality, and that's kind of one of the greatest things about virtual reality, is that, oh, I think I skipped one. Reality is very optional, right? It really is. So what do I mean by that? Say the physical limitations of physics, of time, of space, those are all completely optional. So who's old enough to actually have seen The Matrix here? I hope more than half. Please make me feel better. Okay, great, awesome. One of the biggest contentions I have with The Matrix, and I love that whole series, is how realistic is it that no one could tell that they're in The Matrix? You guys remember that part? They're like, it's just like the real world, right? Like how were the robots able to create this incredible universe? And my contention with that is that if you were born in The Matrix, why would you care? Why would you know? Why would you even know what reality is like, right? If you were strapped into a VR headset the minute you were born, someone's going to do this. I know someone's going to do this to a baby. But anyways, what does it matter what the world looks like? It could be a bunch of pink polygons, and every time you clap, a balloon pops up. It doesn't matter. That's your reality. That's your only reality, right? So, I think in the Matrix, the robots really went above and beyond in Call of Duty. They could have just, they could have little pixels running around. You don't know the difference. That's your reality, right? So, the point is that reality, it really is optional. You have complete control over it. And when you're that immersed, it's amazing because, just to have, you just feel like a superhero, and it just really is cool. I skipped the one earlier, if you could click back, Sergeant Settle, is this really plays in so well to those non-traditional learners who don't maybe learn very well in a traditional learning environment, okay? For a lot of people, doing is learning. It's very hard for them to sit, like it is for you right now, for hours and hours at a time, and virtual reality lets you put your hands on things. Obviously, I don't have to explain the benefits of that. For a lot of people, that's just a better way of learning for a lot of folks. And here's Ready Player One. So once again, embodied presence. Feeling like you're part of the action, feeling like you're part there, is really powerful. And so with that, I'm going to show you guys that quick video. I know I'm running short on time, so I'm going to jump to my Facebook page here. Little background on this video. Back when the HTC Vive was relatively new, it had been out for less than about a year. I had taken it out to some of the units to get some feedback. This is a group of Chinese linguists over in Hawaii, and we put about 30 of them into it, and these are their experiences and some of their words. So let's enjoy that.
Yeah, can you go ahead and walk off the side? This will help you overcome your fear. Just walk off. I promise.
知识双分子层和镶嵌在知识层中的丰富蛋白质组成。有些蛋白质功能主要是传递信息，另一些蛋白质的主要功能就是运输载体。水和氧气可以自由通过细胞膜。 大分子如糖类可通过小型泵或通道通过细胞膜。
已至垂暮之年的伊斯坎德尔国王，在奄奄一息之际，踏遍所有地区，苦苦地找寻永生。
It sounds incredible.
Yeah. Dude.
Am I gonna die right now?
No, you're good, you're good.
Oh, that's close. Oh, wow. Alright, this is...
I got you, don't worry, don't worry.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
Wow, you cannot handle it.
Oh.
Holy crap.
All right, that's it. Any questions?
I was thinking, like, I think part of the problem in America is that 911, people think of 911.
I was like, now we're gonna talk about problems in America. Like, who's talking? I know, right? That was,
Yeah.
is that next Facebook video thing. So yeah, that's some of the experiences.
What's the price tag?
So this industry being so new, it's evolving so rapidly, almost to the point I was just telling the doctor that every time I recommend a system, you know, a better one's going to be across the corner. So I wouldn't recommend worrying about that. But it really depends on the experience that you want, obviously. Right now, basically you need a gaming rig. The main crux of the challenge is the GPU, the graphics processor unit. VR definitely takes a lot more processing power than traditional computing. So basically for a very low-end computing system, you'd want to drop at least $1,200, for a high-end maybe $2,500. And then the systems themselves, they keep dropping in price, and then there's newer ones coming out. The HTC Vive that you just saw here is now down to $500 for that system, but there's a pro version where you can go up even higher. Now there's one really exciting one I'd like to talk to you guys about. If you guys know who Mark Zuckerberg is, he seems to be someone that we know. But his goal, if you guys have ever seen his Oculus presentations, is to get 1 billion people into VR. And so he's made something very accessible. It's called the Oculus Go. And it's not a six-off system, meaning you can only have freedom of where you can look, not where you can move. So it's a very kind of limited experience, but it's really a great entryway into VR if you guys aren't willing to drop a huge amount of money but want to get sort of a good experience. The Oculus Go starts at $200. And then Oculus just announced that they're going to be creating the Oculus Quest, which is a six-off, meaning 6 degrees of freedom. You can move around, and there's no tethering, no cords, No sensors. The sensors are built into the headsets, and those will be out next spring in for $400. I would highly suggest that's a great entry point. I think the price point is right. And for educational purposes and military training, I think the Quest is going to be amazing. So I know it's a lot of hype. You know, I'm one of those guys. But everything that I've read and seen so far, I follow this industry very closely on a daily basis, and it's getting people super excited. So if you kind of want to wait. Now, the Oculus Go, one thing I'll tell you guys, an amazing experience I had recently. I had this $2,500 PC rig, and it was actually the Oculus Go that gave me the most personal experience with my family. And that is that it's so accessible, it's completely standalone, right? There's no phone required, no computer, no screens. You just have the headset, you just put it on. Everything's internalized, it's got a mobile processor and everything. It's just a very simple way to engage with people socially. And what I want to tell you is for language training, for example, you could very easily, tomorrow, you could order 4 Oculus Go's and run a virtual classroom, right? A virtual classroom where everyone can be engaged, feel like they're there together in a classroom from 4 different parts of the world. Myself, my daughter, and my brother had 3 Oculus Go's. We have it on our heads. We're playing board games. We're playing word games. We're watching 360 videos together. We're doing this, and it kind of gives you that impression and that feeling that you're there with that person. So that's pretty amazing if you guys are into that kind of thing. Another thing I'm developing is actually a tour of Pyongyang. Once again, something that you can't really do in reality, right? That's what virtual reality is really good at, is doing things you can't do in reality. You can't go to Pyongyang, North Korea, right? So I'm building a VR tour where you can actually go in there. So that's, sorry, totally to get off your question, ma'am. But yeah, anywhere between 200 on the low end. Guys, I wouldn't recommend going the mobile route anymore. That was a great way for this technology to kind of get mainstream, was the mobile phone related VR. It's kind of moved on from that, and even though phones are really powerful, they're just not optimized. They get really hot. They're, you want to use your phone. There's other reasons why it's kind of, the industry's kind of moved on from that. So that's really the real, that's like the golf cart, you want to at least drive the, Camry or hopefully the Tesla or the Maserati, so you don't have to settle for that. So I wouldn't recommend it. It's $10. You can get a headset, pop your phone in, some kind of gimmicky experiences, but definitely don't base your judgment on that experience alone. Yeah. So anywhere from there to the very high end.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of so this is the first time I'm really hearing about using virtual reality for language learning, and it seems really effective. I mean, I'm a linguist, and obviously, and our constant struggle is getting the training. So we rely on these NCS courses, which are great. They're hard to get into, and they're very expensive, even locally. Right. So this seems like a really good alternative that can save the military a lot of money, and be as close to those really expensive immersion trips that we can get without actually going overseas.
Right, and that's something that we hear a lot, is that can this replace immersion trips? And of course it can't replace reality, but there's certain aspects of it that it can. And so I'm really excited about that. I would just tell you guys, though, this is sort of a little bit of a glimpse of the future, right? So, building an entire ecosystem for a brand new platform takes usually, a few decades. There has to be a user base that's wide enough for companies to invest, $100 million on a product. So it's not quite there yet. In fact, we just finished a class. Sergeant Crandall's one of my victims, but I just taught a class with him and went completely mobile. And I'll tell you, I believe right now, for example, the mobile ecosystem took a long time to get there, right? When you first got the iPads issued to a DLI, $500 toys, we've all heard of the concerns with that. Well, mobile, God, that industry's moved so far forward. There's so many apps online now in the app stores that are so good for language learning that didn't exist. And that's where I want VR to be maybe in 5 to 10 years. But for example, right now, I think mobile's ready. We literally went and they got a GLC course, which sadly is still on paper. No. If anyone here is NCS, I'm not shooting at you guys. But it is still on paper. And we went completely digital, and we had fantastic results. Very small sample size, but there were 3 1+ folks in his class, and 6 weeks later, 3 2+. Wow. In listening. And we use very sort of unconventional methods. I'm a huge fan of mobile as well. So we watched the news every morning. They were chatting with Koreans. They were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. and had some great results. And Sergeant Crandall just told me he still does this every day, and that's really where the win comes in, I think. If you can get someone to use these apps on your phone, on your iPad, and continually do that throughout the year, then that's the big win.
Why would you say, like in your opinion, the top 3 apps that the linguist should use?
Well, that's tough. I'm gonna have to go ranking top 3. All right. I would say Quizlet still reigns supreme in many ways. For a lot of people, it's just for building vocabulary. And Quizlet's come a long way. There's features on there that did not exist before. One that we used quite a bit, and I know Sergeant Crandall likes. There's one called Happy Talk. There's a lot of other sort of social apps, but these are made for language learning. This Happy Talk is incredible. You log in.
Hello Talk.
Hello Talk, excuse me, not Happy Talk. You can be happy while you're using it. But it will literally give you hundreds of people that are ready right there to chat with you, to talk with you. Obviously, there's some OPSEC concerns. You got to make sure you're being smart. But that's fantastic. And third, thanks, Sergeant Crandall. What do we use a lot? I might just have to go with YouTube. It's so dang good. And it's funny. I told my daughter how I learned language because I'm trying to shove Korean down her throat as much as possible while she's still young. And I told her, I went through DLI in 1997, and we had our cassette tapes and our flashcards. And then she's always like, "But Dad, didn't you guys, have the internet then?" I'm like, "Yeah, but there was no Wikipedia, Google, Facebook, Amazon, or She's like, "That's not the internet." But but yeah, so I'm just a huge fan, and I think that's the direction that we need to be going. And once again, VR, you're right. It's there. It's kind of at that hitting that corner where once it becomes that platform. And I have no doubt in my mind. I will bet any amount of money that I have that it will be, just based on user experience alone. And you see so many different industries using it right now for learning for immersive purposes. And I'll tell you guys that accessibility, I want to tell you real quick, if you were trapped, and where are we like as normal humans that aren't in jail? In what experience are we ever trapped? We can't move, we have to stay in one place. No escape. That's the best place to do VR. Anyone guess? There's one place. Not on the toilet. Not on the toilet. Don't do VR on the toilet. Although I think that I have. But anyways, it's an airplane. It's awesome.
Oh,
yeah. So you don't have to sit there and stare at a little screen. And the second place would be if you're kind of trapped in a hospital room. And I think actually that's one of the best use cases. They have VR headsets now set up for people who are stuck for a month in a hospital bed. My God, they can just go anywhere in the world that they want. So that's pretty awesome.
Sorry, just a follow-up. So I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but I was just watching the videos and I got the motion sickness. Is that something that goes away? Is it something that's just like... Because I'm tempted to not do it just because I'm like,
right.
Oh, make it easy.
Yeah. There's actually a really big misconception about what motion sickness is and actually vertigo. So there's some key differences, right?
I don't know what it was, but I just got
Right, so you're looking at these objects on this huge monitor, right, and your body's not moving, so that's the problem. If your body was moving at the same motion and the direction, and that's why they tell you to look at the horizon when you're, in a car, your body's moving along with it.
Hey, sorry, Kirk.
It's something, yeah.
We take a quick break.
We need to cut off?
Yeah, we're out of time, and the curriculum manager
You're right.
to speak as well.
Okay, then I'll answer this very last question, and then I'll be done. I'll be out of your way. That's a real big concern. Motion sickness with any technology, right? Especially large screens, or in this case, the screen on your face, is going to be a concern. The reason why, one of the reasons VR is so popular right now is because they've been able to overcome that through technology. And the reason for that is because of refresh rates, right, and latency. So if there's even a millisecond of delay from the real world to what you're trying to perceive and your brain is trying to connect, you're going to start experiencing those things, right? There's also, you have the screen literally 2 inches from your face. If the resolution is not good enough, you'll see blocks. You'll see ghosting, right? There's other sort of phenomena that goes on with your eyes when you're doing VR. Fortunately, every time technology gets a little bit better, that gets reduced. There's always going to be some number of people. It's actually proprioception. You guys know what that is? That's the control of your muscles when you're not looking at them. It's like jugglers who can, do things without looking at their bodies. People who don't have high proprioception have a difficult time in VR because they can't see their body, right? So they don't see their body, but they're moving around. And it's hard for them to process. And if you kind of train your body, or if you're naturally gifted at that, you won't have any problems at all. But some people, they might. So I don't know if that helps.
Get good at juggling.
Start juggling? And playing games and those kinds of things. Cool. The younger generation tends to have better inner ear balance as well. So, and I'm sorry, if there are any more questions, that's all I've got for time. And so I'm going to hand this over back to Sergeant Sell.